Good evening, everyone. I can't, okay, got the grid on.
Yeah, but my picture isn't up there. Of course, nobody wants to look at me anyway, but.
Mark, do you have do you have a start video icon on the bottom of your screen?
Okay. Yeah.
There you go. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Welcome. And if everyone could please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, we can get this started. Thank you so much. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United
States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation,
under God,
indivisible,
with
liberty and justice for all.
So our next order of business is public comment. And if people can indicate if they would like to make public comment. Kate, I see you. So you are there to acknowledge people. I would ask that since Dr. Bryce is doing a reopening plan presentation a little bit later on in the meeting, which I don't anticipate being too much later, that if anyone has comments or questions about that, if you could wait until that point in the meeting, that would be great. If you prefer to do it now, that is fine too. But at that point, we will be able to have more of a conversation about it. With that being said, I will go to Kate to see if we have anyone who would like to make public comment now.
Okay, so due to the amount of people in this meeting, we have unmuted, or we've muted everyone. So please, as Chairperson Schofield mentioned, there is a way to raise your hand. And if you hover down at the bottom, I believe on the, if you go by your name in the participants, there's a way to raise your hand. And I just ask that you raise your hand and then we go through, and as I call on you, the tech support will help to unmute you. Something will pop up on your screen to say host has asked you to unmute. Please click that and then start your comment, okay? So the first person that I see is Miss Shannon Gray. So will the host help to?
My only question is if I sent a question into Dr. Bryce's administrative assistant, if that question has gotten to him.
Yes, those questions have gotten to Kate, who has gone through them, and those will come up at the question and answer part to be answered by the superintendent.
Okay, then I don't need to ask. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just looking, I do not see any other hands raised. Does anyone else see any? Waiting for more. Go through. Chairperson Schofield, I think that's it.
Okay, thank you, Kate. I was just going through as well to make sure. So.
Thank you.
Okay, so with that being said, we will move on now. Can I please have a motion to seal the executive session minutes from tonight's executive session?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, thank you. We will move on now to the consent agenda. And before we vote on the consent agenda, I am pulling off letter D, the approval of Mount Hope High School Assistant Principal's contract. That is being pulled off. So we are only voting on 4A through C.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you. And then
Chairperson Schofield, I am so sorry. I just had a request from Ms. Ellsworth, and I'm going to ask the tech host to unmute and make her a co-host as other school committee members, because I just want to make sure with the last vote and this vote, We have all of you unmuted. I apologize for the delay. Thank you.
All set now, Kate?
Okay.
Ms. Ellsworth, can you?
I don't know.
Yes.
I don't know if Vic is. I'm unmuted, but I don't know if Vic is unmuted.
Sheila, I'm having trouble hearing you right
I'm
now.
okay.
You're unmuted.
And she's saying she's okay.
Okay.
So was that a vote in the affirmative?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Mr. Saviano, we can move on to superintendent's recommendations and issues. Dr. Bryce, do you have something?
Yes. So because we just voted on that, could I take a moment and do an introduction to the BWRSD community?
Of course, please.
Yep. So first and foremost, I'd like to thank the school committee for voting to approve the contract of the new principal at KMS, Kickamuit Middle School. That principal is Dennis Morrell. Dennis, I see him on my screen. He's waving. People, please wave back to him. Give him a big round of applause. We are so very pleased to have him. Dennis comes to us from Johnston High School, where he's been the high school principal. Prior to that, he was the middle school principal. He has over 10 years of principal experience. Prior to that, he was an assistant principal for several years. Before that, he was a teacher. He comes very highly recommended. The interview panel that interviewed him was very supportive of his demeanor, the things that he has done. And we'd just like to welcome him to the BWRSD family. Welcome aboard. We're so excited to have you. And we look forward to having you meet the entire KMS community. And we will schedule that for as soon as possible.
Thank you.
Thanks.
On behalf of the school committee, welcome. So our next order of business is superintendent's recommendations and issues, and I don't see Mr. Saviano, but I am assuming you are here. And maybe not. I'm
Aaron,
checking.
I can read it if you need me to.
Me too.
Okay, let me just check it. I mean, I'm happy. I can do it too. I just don't want to take over John's spot here. Mr. Saviano? Okay, it doesn't seem.
Chair, I don't see him either, and I will reach out.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Not sure if you had trouble getting on this link. Okay, Brian, go for it.
And Madam Chair, are we, if you look at A,
Mhm.
is that one of the ones that you want to?
Well, I think, you know what, I was thinking that I have something to say in the discussion portion of that, so I'm just going to do it that way.
Okay, recommendation number S2020 TAC 23, that the school committee, upon the recommendation of the superintendent and supported by the Budget and Facility Subcommittee, approve the preliminary FY21 budget.
Can I get a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. So Brian and Adam seconded it, and now we can have discussion. What Dr. Bryce was alluding to is that we can certainly have as much discussion as anyone wanted. I was going to throw out at some point that I know the budget subcommittee has been working hard on this, and that district admin has as well. So we can certainly move forward with it tonight. It just, I said this last time, and I still feel the same way, that it just feels premature to do this without the state aid numbers. So I want to throw out the suggestion that we table this until we have those state aid numbers, which it's my understanding will be coming to us soon, and then we could put together a more accurate budget based on what those numbers are.
Madam Chair.
Aaron, if I can.
I I hear Sheila, I can hear you, but I can't exactly make out what you're saying. Let me mute myself so you can speak.
So can you hear me? Nod.
Sort of.
So one of the sort of, well, I can't really do anything about it. So I guess my whole thing is the budget that we got, the package that we got was the old package. So the salaries in the medical still needs to be updated. So I don't feel comfortable doing approving a preliminary when those numbers haven't been up. Right, I think we need to get the revenue in and we need to get those two numbers solidified in order to move forward with a preliminary.
Thank you, Sheila. I see Marge's hand.
I don't think we're ready, and it's not only in the medical part, Sheila. I don't think we're ready to pass this preliminary budget yet, and I would like to make a motion to table it.
Second.
Victor, did I hear you second that motion?
Yes, you did.
Okay, so now we are voting on a motion to table. Is there discussion, more discussion on this motion to table it? Seeing none.
Yes.
Is that Sheila?
No, I'm good.
Okay.
To table it.
Okay, so then all in favor of tabling it?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, thank you.
And
Brian opposed it.
I voted on it the first time, so I'm going to stick by my initial vote.
No, I just didn't know if Aaron's heard that or not, Brian.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. And I see that John Saviano is back on, but maybe still talking about technical stuff with Kate. All right, so let's, for the moment, let's continue with Brian, 5B.
Okay. Recommendation number S2020 TAC 24, that the school committee, upon the recommendation of the superintendent and supported by the Budget and Facility Subcommittee, approve the FY20 line item budget adjustments.
Can I get a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Motion made by Adam, seconded by Brian.
Bye-bye.
Discussion.
I
Mrs.
have,
Dodd? Okay, we'll go Marge, Sheila, then Brian.
Well, I'd like to make a motion to table this as well, because I don't think we know how much money we have. And I'm uncomfortable, as I said last Thursday night, with after the fact approvals. So I'd like to see it laid out a whole lot better than it has been. And I think that they could do that when we look at the preliminary, when we look at the budget, because it troubles me that we've spent so much. We have, what is it, 62 items where we overspent and nobody knew about it until just recently. So I'd really like to table this until I have a better idea of just what's going on.
Point of order, it was 12 items, I believe, that were overspent. There may be
62 on
62 line
Thursday.
item adjustments to reduce funds, but there were 12 instances of overruns.
And as a superintendent, one of the things that I just want to clarify, that the budgeted number is an estimate based on prior year spending. And in particular cases, more money would be spent in a particular area, bringing those to the school committee so that the end of the year, end of the fiscal year budget process can be completed so that the auditors can then come in and start to do their work. So I just share that with you.
But that's not what I'm talking about. When you have an overage, you should come to the budget subcommittee and tell them that they have an overage. And we didn't do that for 6 months. So do you really want to get into that discussion, or do you want to do you want to table it, or do you want to vote on it? I'm going to vote no. I mean,
Well,
you know how I feel about it.
I certainly understand how you feel about it.
And I'm not going to go over it again.
I also think that in order for the district to close its books for FY20, we need to make budget adjustments. So the only question is, do we make those now? Do we make those in 2 weeks? Do we make those in a month? But until we make those budget adjustments, we cannot close our FY20 books.
I appreciate that, but I also, I have no idea. These items have been paid. So I don't know what line items they were paid out of. I don't know where the money was moved from what account to pay off the line item adjustments. And I'd like to see all of that together with the closeout of the 20 budget. And I don't see it.
Erin.
Yeah, we'll go Mrs. Ellsworth, and then I see Mr. Bradshaw's hand up as well.
So one of the big things is on the rental line, is the last payment of the lease. Can you hear me?
Mhm.
That in the audit report from last year, we had approved to move that over and pay the last payment with general funds. So that payment shouldn't even be there. That budget adjustment shouldn't be there. So there are many errors within this that we have that I'm seeing. It also, the journal entry with the debt service in the capital, you can't do a debt service. You can't do a debt service budget reduction. We know we've already paid it $1.5 million. You're going to short it if you do that. I think what you're trying to do is a journal entry, which we don't see. We don't need to see. It's a budget adjustment. The other thing is the fund balance. There is no budget for fund balance. It's having like cash in there's no budget for that.
That's right.
You should be seeing that as well. There's a lot of errors in this report. Mm-hmm. I'm with Mark. Like, I think we need to clean this up. We don't need a finalized adjustment. We don't need a finalized adjustment until the audit is ready to be finalized. Like this is not. There's a lot of errors in this that we need to fix before we can move forward.
So I made a motion, it wasn't seconded. Brian made a motion, it was seconded. Where are we?
I thought Brian was speaking next. That's what I had on my. Brian, you need to unmute.
But Marge is right. I mean, she made a motion that wasn't seconded. So I guess we should figure out if there's more discussion on that.
So Marge, is the motion that you would like this tabled and for this to go back to the budget subcommittee before it comes back here again?
Erin, I'll second that motion.
Okay.
Along with the finalization of the FY20 budget. And yes, so it's all one unit instead of two separate ones. We don't owe anybody anything right now. I just don't know where we paid. Well, I already explained that. I'm not going to go over it again. We don't know, and I want to know. So I'd like to table it until we know. Because
Okay.
what I get last week is not what I got this week, which is not what I got 2 weeks ago. And Sheila did a very good job of carrying on with how I felt. So thank you, Victor, for seconding my motion. And
Okay.
so I guess we have to vote on my motion before we vote on the recommendation.
Well,
Okay.
and I just wanted to, Mike, I'll have a little bit of discussion, Madam Chair.
Go for it.
My only comment was I wanted to retract my earlier statement. There are more than 12 adjustments. I think there were 12 reductions, and the rest of those are overage adjustments. So I just wanted to clarify that and retract my earlier statement. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian.
Okay, if there's no further discussion, we will vote on
If I,
margin. Yes, Mr. Ramos.
I'm trying to understand a little bit more what Marge and Sheila have been describing, because I want to understand whether the concern is about the presentation or the concern is about the substance, because I don't want to needlessly say that we should go through more work if we're just talking about form over substance, and there are things that can be fixed on the back end, but the information that we've received is correct. Versus if okay, which pieces of information? I just want to understand which pieces of information.
Do you want me to go line by line? Do you want to go line
Don't
by
want to do
line?
that.
No, I don't want to go line by line. What is it? Is it that the budget adjustment numbers that are on the spreadsheet that we received are incorrect, or is it that there's just incorrect, like it sounded like you were saying, Sheila, that there's information that was included that doesn't need to be included and is a sort of process issue that you're concerned with. I just want to know if the numbers are wrong or if it's the presentation that's wrong.
There's both. There's incorrect information, and then there's information that doesn't need to be here.
It's both.
It's both. But my more concern is that have an impact to our general fund. So I'm not worried about the thing that we don't need to.
And my other question is, it sounds like the answer must be no, since you're moving to table, but I'll ask it anyway, whether the issues that have been identified are things that could potentially be taken care of with a motion to amend the proposed line item adjustments, and we get this done, or if it's something that we don't have all of the information currently available to us in order to make those corrections, and we have no choice but to go back and do more work.
I'll answer that, Adam.
Okay.
For me, anyway, I don't know if line A was overspent. I don't know what line we took the money out of to pay line A. So I don't know where the money was moved. I know it was there. I just don't know where it came from. And so that's form, and it's also substance.
I'm sorry, I just to understand what you're saying, whereas historically you've seen where when we were making a budget adjustment, it says to transfer X amount of dollars from transportation to be added to salaries. Just, I know that I'm making those up and those are not real ones right now.
No, but
that's not what's there right now, right, is what you're saying.
That's correct. And I also made the statement last Thursday that the budget adjustments should have been made when they were identified. And that's not me. Anyway, the adjustments should have been made as we went along, which is what I'm accustomed to. And gee, this is my 20th budget and I've never seen this before. So I need for everyone to back up and take a closer look at what you're doing.
Thank you for answering those questions.
Is there any other discussion on Mrs. McBride's motion? Okay, so right now we're going to vote on the motion for the line item budget adjustments to go back to budget. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, and then we have to vote on the original I think.
Now,
No.
that original motion, that
Table
motion included a
motion.
tabling of it, so that
Yeah,
that
okay.
killed the original.
Yeah.
motion.
There's no more motions. You've tabled it.
Great. Okay, thank you, everyone. So now we will move on to the presentation of the reopening plan. Dr. Bryce is going to give a presentation, and then we'll do a Q&A, and we can start with all of the questions that people sent in to Kate Brown, and move on from there. We planned this Zoom until 8:30. I just want everybody to know, that this is a plan that was required by the Department of Ed of all districts, and that we should all expect that this plan changes and evolves over time. That there's just, that I just don't want anybody to think like just because this is the plan that went into RIDE, that this is the plan we're going to have. I know RIDE wanted all the districts to take a first stab, since it's not going to be a one size fits all for every district. So I sort of look at this, and Dr. Bryce, you can correct me if you feel differently, but I look at this as a starting point, really. And I know that's maybe minimizing it, because I do know how much work has gone into this. So I don't mean it in that way at all. I mean, people have put a ton of time into this, teachers, administrators, community members, everyone. So I don't want to minimize that, but just to say that this is a plan that is going to evolve, because none of us can see the future. And it's just, there's a lot of uncertainties around this. And also, I just want to make it clear that whatever people decide for their children, the district, we want to be flexible, because we understand that this is an incredibly difficult decision, and it's a decision that could change for families from now to next week to the opening of schools, if that even occurs. So with that,
Yep.
Dr. Bryce.
So Chairperson Schofield, thank you very much. And so good evening, everyone. Several things. I've got a couple of points, and then we're going to show the PowerPoint. Let me just start off by thanking all of the staff, all of the community members that have sent in questions. We have been answering questions. I've been answering questions, on weekends and early in the morning, late in the evening, just trying to give parents and members of the community and staff and students as many answers as we possibly can. The requirement by RIDE was for every district to submit a plan. And I actually think that our plan is, in my estimation, similar to the budget process, which is, this is just a completely unprecedented year. The things that we traditionally have done, we're not doing them or not able to do them with the level of specificity at the time that we've done in the past. And we will deal with that, but it does require flexibility on our part. Hopefully it also requires flexibility on the part of our parents. With that being said, I am going to ask for the tech team to put up the PowerPoint, because I don't see it. Yep, here we go. And so first and foremost, it is critically important that we understand all of the requirements that RIDE has provided. And so I would ask, let's go to the next slide. So RIDE actually presented a roadmap, and that roadmap actually extended from early July into August, which will be the opening of school. What is critical for everyone to understand are the different components that we need to develop our initial plan, provide and get feedback on that plan, submit it to RIDE. We did that in the appropriate time, and we are eagerly awaiting feedback on our plan. We believe that we may have that feedback tomorrow evening. And once we have that feedback, staff and the team of 60 individuals that worked on that will provide an update to the community. We will put out another letter. We are also I am hosting, along with building principals, town hall meetings for each of our schools over the next 2 weeks. So we have meetings scheduled for Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday of this week, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday of next week, and expect that, as well as several communications about details in the plan. Next slide. For everybody to understand what RIDE has required of us, this slide really encapsulates the full range of possibilities. The governor has been very clear that she wants all districts to plan for and to build for a full in-person for all students. And so if you look to the far right, where in terms of the community spread, schools would resume 100% in-person operations, some social distancing protocols. Distance learning is integrated with in-person programs and utilized as necessary for individual students. And if we go back up that continuum all the way to full distance learning for all, like we had in the spring. And then in the middle, we would have partial in-person, limited in-person. The real key when we began this process, the thought was that we would ensure that there was full in-person K-5, and that at the secondary level, that we would have some type of hybrid process. But we didn't know if that was the case. RIDE then was very clear. We want you to try to get all kids back in school. So that's what we spent several weeks doing. And then at probably the 11th hour, RIDE actually reduced their requirement, which said if you do not have space available and you cannot put all students back into classrooms, you have to prioritize elementary grades, but at the secondary level, you could actually provide students with some type of hybrid learning. And so that's what you would see. You would see, we call it hybrid, but it's really some variation of partial or limited in-person at the secondary level. And we'll explain more of that later. Next slide, please. RIDE has provided us with a host of information. So here's just an example of the guidance document, the template. They also gave us consulting services with the district management group out of Boston that were helpful in helping us to think about the process. And so we work with them as well as other districts. We also, I also work with the other superintendents in the East Bay to make sure, what are you doing with your plan? What are we doing with our plan? So that there is some level of consistency where possible. Next slide. So major themes that clearly came out. Transportation is one. And that is why one of the things that we know is that we will not be able to put as many students on buses as we've done in the past. Typically buses hold about 54 students. We will have to reduce that number from 54 to about 24, 25. With that means that we're gonna need more students to walk to school, to be driven by their parents or carpool, things like that. We also know staffing is an issue, that some staff may have medical conditions that would preclude them from returning. It is not as broad as people think. It's very specific. If you're currently undergoing cancer treatment, then that might be something that would exclude you. But if you just have allergies, as I do, that would not be something that would preclude you from returning. We also know that we are going to need additional staff. Why are we going to need additional staff? We're going to need more staff for things like additional monitors on buses to help with lunches, because lunches will in some cases be held in the classroom. Additional health techs to work with our registered nurses in the health suites because we now need to set up isolation rooms. We also recognize the issue of scheduling. Scheduling was probably among the most difficult challenges, just because how do you schedule students? First of all, how many students are going to want a distance learning option, and parents are going to want a distance learning option? How do you schedule them? Are you scheduling them into the same class that they would be in if they were in person? And these are things that we had to work through. Finally, the distance learning, the modality of learning, live streaming, different curriculum consistency, inconsistency, and then health and safety. What are the protocols for students or staff who test positive? And so those are things that we had to consider. Okay. So here's the roadmap. The review plans, we are currently in this process where RIDE, the Rhode Island Department of Education, is reviewing plans. We hope to get that information, as I mentioned earlier, back tomorrow by the 28th. And because we are required to post that online by the 31st, our full plan, we think it's about 80 pages, preparing to reopen from the 1st through the 17th, when the governor will make that announcement. As I don't know if many of you know, but the Superintendents Association, we're meeting again with the governor on Wednesday to share our concerns and to work with the issue of how do we open. When it says LEA, local education agency, it would be the school district. So in our case, it would be we are in LEA, we are a local education agency, Bristol Warren Regional School District. Barrington would be next, and East Providence and Providence. Those are all we're all considered LEAs. We hope to get the governor to make a decision earlier in the summer, so it gives us additional time to plan and to staff up. But right now, we expect that her decision is going to be made in consultation with health officials no later than August 17th. And then between the 17th and the 31st is going to certainly be the requirement to final preparation to open schools, to get everything ready so that we can have our students return. Okay. As I mentioned earlier, and again, thank you to all the members of the team that helped us to build our plan. 60 members, administrators, BWEA, which is our Teachers Association, our C94 leaders as well, which represent custodians and secretaries and other staff, and certainly a lot of input and feedback. We held meetings weekly, oftentimes 3-hour sort of marathon sessions twice a week with breakout sessions. We've looked at all the guidance. We have a pretty robust folder of information. If a country in Europe or any place else, in any country in Israel, in the Middle East, reopen Australia, we actually look to see what they did to try to take pluses and minuses away from that, so that we had a better understanding of what to expect and what we should plan for. Okay. So because we were so focused on this, we identified 4 areas: health and safety of students and staff, options for teaching and learning, engaging academics, and SEL, which stands for social emotional support. And then, of course, you have to deal with the issue of staffing and resources, which again goes back to the budget issues, which are just not as stable as we are used to being, because typically we would have state funding, all of our numbers, we would have had that sometime early in the spring. And with the pandemic, we just have not had all of that information up to this point. We're actually going to take these, right? So when we talk about health and safety, I actually want us, because I think health and safety is so critical. But when we talk about health and safety, I think we also need to talk about what we're doing in terms of preparing students and what type of schedule we're going to offer. So in terms of health and safety, here are some of the things that people are going to need to do every day. So parents are going to have to screen their students every day. It's critically important that they're checking to make sure that their student is not exhibiting symptoms. All staff entering buildings will have to do the same thing as well. If students or staff start to exhibit symptoms, we ask them that they stay home, check in with their medical provider. We also know that we are going to need students, families to remind students to wear their mask and to practice social distancing when on campus, to wash their hands, to use hand sanitizer. These are the things that we can do to keep everyone safe. And we're going to be very focused on those things every day. Next. So one of the things that we do know absolutely is that we want students and staff are required to wear masks. So we're going to want students to wear masks on buses, in schools, in the hallways, in common areas, and when not in stable groups. We will have masks available for students. We have placed an order. We have about, I think, 2,500 right now. We are placing another order for multiple thousands of disposable masks because we believe it critically important. But it's also important that students stay in stable groups when they're in their classroom, especially at the elementary and middle school level, that their desk will be spaced 6 feet apart. And at that time, they would have the option of removing their mask if they are seated or if they remain seated at their desk. If they they'd have to put their mask on if they're walking, to the pencil sharpener or something like that. Next. In terms of bus transportation, again, this is what the Department of Health, RIDO stands for Rhode Island Department of Health, is limiting the number of students allowed from a high 54, 55 to about 21 to 24. That is going to require us to make some significant changes to how we get students to school. And so we've done that. You'll see it later. One of the things that we had to do was change the structure of which students come to school first. And so right now we are beginning the school day with our high school students, then our middle school students, and then our elementary school students. And the start times, there is more time in between those start times because it allows for the students to be picked up, for them to be screened, as well as for the buses to be wiped down, those high touch areas to be wiped down in between different runs between elementary, high school, middle school, and elementary. Next. So when we talk about start times, for the high school, the start time is going to be 7:45. Dismissal is 2:25. Middle school start is 8:30. Dismissal is 3 p.m. At the elementary level, the start time is 9:15. The dismissal is going to be 3:30. Okay. All right. So when we talk about school arrival and dismissal, certainly staggered arrival for walkers, drop-offs, bus students. So that means we really are expanding the time. And so there will be probably about a 30-minute window when students can be dropped off or walk to school, as well as the buses will show up. Different exits, entrances and exits will be used for students in different categories. So the students that ride the bus will come into one door. Students that are dropped off by parents will walk into another. Students that actually walk to school or ride their bikes will go into yet a third door. Students will wear masks, use hand sanitizer as they enter and exit the building, and we will have staff assigned to support students during these times, additional staff. The issue of stable grouping really comes up. And so let me just read this slide. I try not to read the slides verbatim, but when we talk about stable grouping, it requires the same group of students and limited adults spend most of the day in the same room or a limited number of rooms. Stable groups help to mitigate the risk of spreading the virus. And so in grades K to 5, stable groups will consist of a max of 22 students if space permits, and adults. We actually think that number in some schools is going to be lower. In some elementaries, it will be about 18 students with an adult or maybe 2 adults. And so we're really working, but we wanted to just give you the max number that we're thinking about. In grades 6 to 8, the stable group, because of the hybrid schedule, would be 15. We don't want more than 15 students in a classroom at a time. And then in grades 9 through 12, we are unable to maintain a stable group based on student course selection. High school, unlike other grades, once students get to high school, students actually are really integrated throughout the building. So while the traditional core academic classes, English, math, social studies, and science, and maybe world language, tend to be more homogeneous in terms of grades. There will still be students in there that are 10th graders taking a 9th grade course. Maybe they didn't do as well as in that course last year, or there will be 9th graders taking the second level, Spanish 2 instead of Spanish 1. And so it's really difficult. And then when we get to the co-curriculars, the CTEs, the Ps, the health, things like that, the mix or the integration of students is almost uniform throughout the building. So that means that we are unable to maintain stable groups at the high school. So it's going to be imperative that our high school students utilize masks, that they wear masks when they're in the building, when they're in the hall, unless they're in their classroom, and their desks are 6 feet apart, then they might be able to remove their mask. We are still waiting on feedback from the Department of Health and the Department of Education about that plan. So let's talk about social distancing. All right. All students and staff practice social distancing of 6 feet when in schools. And we will actually have materials in the halls, in common areas, in classrooms about maintaining social distancing. The classrooms will be reorganized so desks are 6 feet apart. And then when students are unable to maintain the social distance of 6 feet or not in stable groups, we are going to require them to wear a mask. So we talk about common areas, right? Ongoing disinfecting of schools, outdoor classrooms, and playground equipment. One thing that I would mention is that our community has really reached out to us. They've given us and provided us some really great ideas. One of those ideas is the use of outdoors as a classroom. And certainly that is something that we are exploring, working with local providers to get tents so that we could conduct some classes outside. It is a great idea. It is not an idea that does not have its own issues. Some of those issues have nothing to do with students being outside, have everything to do with student safety. And so we just need to make sure that we can keep students safe from a traditional safety of student perspective, as opposed to also the health issue that we're dealing with right now. And you see examples of staff in these pictures that would be cleaning and disinfecting different either classrooms or playground equipment that would need to be conducted multiple times each day, and especially after one stable group has used that equipment, then then it needs to be disinfected before a different stable group can come in and actually utilize it. Next. Isolation room, requirement by RIDE, by the Department of Education, to have a place if a student gets sick at school. And we all know that students get sick at school. If a student gets sick at school or gets ill, they would be in the isolation room where the health tech or the nurse would monitor them. We would call the parents. The parents would need to come and pick them up right away. And then after that student leaves, the room would need to be disinfected. Next. All right, so remember we talked about the models and we showed that model, this model early on. And so I just wanted to bring it back. Next. So at the elementary, our goal, in accordance with what the governor has asked for and RIDE, is that we want to bring all of our students back. And so there are really two things to think about for elementary students. For elementary students, we're going full in person, but we have to make sure that we limit the number of students in the classrooms. We think to about 20 to 22, right? We know that in some cases it's going to be 18. What does that mean? Well, it means that we're first looking to see the number of families that have chosen distance learning as an option so that we can figure out our numbers, and then we will be able to build classes. In terms of a limited in-person may in effect be the same thing as full in-person at the elementary level, because we believe that the class size will be small enough that it will be less than 15. And then of course, full distance learning, and we'll talk about that if we need to get to that. All right, next. Oh, absolutely, go back for once, go back one. Yeah, so let me talk about the screen time. So there were a number of lessons learned from distance learning in the spring. I want to commend all of our teachers, administrators, most importantly, our students and our families for the great job they did with distance learning. We were successful. We believe that the majority of students learned. I said majority, not all. And so as we think about planning for distance learning moving forward, there are some things that we're going to need students to do. There are some things that we're going to need staff to do. So one of the things that we're going to do is we are actually going to, if we go back to a full distance learning method of instruction or model of instruction, we are going to limit the amount of screen time for students. So as you can see, the limit on screen time will be, for K-2 will be 1 to 2 hours. For grades 3 to 5, it will be 3 hours max per day. So what does that mean? What would students do the rest of the time? Well, we are actively working with our textbook publishers and planning on purchasing workbooks. So students would have workbooks which would support the lessons that they're doing online. So it would actually turn out to be much more like what they get in their classroom than what they got last year, which was all virtual all the time. The other thing that would be important is that one of the things we're going to ask students to do is to make sure that they turn their cameras on. Last year, we noticed that sometimes students would show up, but they wouldn't turn their cameras on. And so it really made communication for teachers very difficult. And so we're going to have a requirement this year where students have to show up. They have to turn their cameras on. They can't be in their pajamas or their PJs. We just want to make, to the best of our ability, to normalize what happens if the governor and RIDE make a decision at some point to go full distance. We would have these best practices in place. Two other things. We talk about virtual support days would be on Monday, where students would get additional help. But we certainly expect that there would be teaching and learning taking place for all students. All right, next. At the middle school and the high school level, here's what we figured out. As we walked our buildings, we determined that we did not have enough space in classrooms to put all of our middle school and high school students in the class. The class size is larger in general. It's 20, 24, 20, it's actually, I think 26 and 28. And there's no way we can get that many students into the classrooms socially distanced 6 feet apart. And so we tried our best to try to come up with a way to do that. And we were really struggling. And then RIDE gave districts, if space was an issue, gave us the ability to go to a hybrid schedule. And so that's what we have. And so our goal for middle school and high school students is for students to be physically in school 5 days every 2 weeks. And they would learn virtually or through distance learning the other 5 days of those 2 weeks. We believe that we can do this, and we can do it in an even more effective way than we did in the spring, because we are working to ensure that all of our teachers have document cameras, and that the teachers will be able to teach both the students that are physically in front of them and their classmates at the same time, using the document camera technology, so that the students can see the board, they can see the whiteboard or the documents that they are sharing, and actually engage in a conversation with their teachers in that manner. It is something that we're going to have to need professional development for our teachers, and we have some days scheduled for that. How this would work is that we would actually divide the students based on the alphabet, A through L, M through Z. In some cases, some of the conversations we've had at the middle school is that the division may not be A through L, it may be actually like A through N is what I think they're looking at, just so that it will work. Students will get either 2 days of in-person instruction and 3 days out, or 3 days in and 2 days distance learning. Either way. We also have a screen time limit at the middle school level of 3 hours and at the high school of 4 hours. Does that mean that they won't have things to do? They certainly will have novels to read, other literature, other workbooks, and other things that will certainly keep them busy. Next slide, please. So we really, one of the things that we try to do, and I will share with everybody, that the research literature about distance learning and virtual learning was very Spartan when we started looking at this back in the spring, and we broke the rules. And we broke the rules because the rules said students should only get remedial help. You shouldn't introduce new content. You should only have them for an hour a day. And we didn't think that that was the right dosage of instruction and academics for our children. So we really just said, we're going to do this. We're going to teach new content, but we're going to build in support. And those virtual support days, of all the things that we've done, those virtual support days, I think with the distance learning have been among the most successful and the most popular. And so we're going to do that. But the other thing that we did not do is we did not shy away from our co-curricular offerings. We didn't say students won't get health, they won't get PE, they won't get music and other things. Will it be different? Absolutely. And so we just want to reassure our parents that we're going to offer a full range of academic and co-curricular classes, but they may be different because of health conditions and health concerns on the part of keeping everyone safe. And so, you know, I've had conversations with our music department. We absolutely love our music department, but our music department is also working through, you know, what do we need to do, because we don't think that our students will be able to engage in chorus in the way that they've done in prior years. What is a different and yet still core element of their instructional program, and they're working through that. Next. So in terms of social emotional, I will tell you that I am a big believer, and the research bears out. So if anybody wants to know about social emotional learning, go to casel.org, CASEL. which is sort of is not even sort of, they are the definitive expert on social emotional learning in education in the United States. They're out of Chicago. And what their research indicates is that schools and school districts that have a clear social emotional curriculum, that they are providing that to all students, not just students that, you know, are having a problem, but they are helping all students develop, you know, effective character and positive and productive habits, and knowing, you know, how to, you know, tell if they're feeling good, if they're not feeling bad, or if they're not feeling good in terms of their mental or emotional health. Those are things that help students to learn and to become productive members of the school community in the larger society. And so we are actually working to implement what I call tier one, right? So tier one is for everyone. There are a couple of things that happen in distance learning that just absolutely blew us away, that were earth-shattering. And one of them was that we had teachers that had breakfast with their kids every day. And they would just take 15 minutes, 20 minutes, everybody would bring their breakfast and they would have breakfast with them. And it just kind of snowballed, and it became, hey, just an opportunity to check in. How you doing? Everybody okay? All right, we're gonna, you know, how's your breakfast? And then they would get through the day. And so one of the things that we are requiring is that all students at the elementary level have what we call morning meeting. And that morning meeting can certainly include more than just breakfast, but we want to start there. We want to make sure that we are connecting with our young people, that they see their teachers, they feel that sense of connection with the teacher as well as with their classmates. At the secondary level, middle school and high school, we want to ensure that we have advisory, not just advisory in name only, but real advisory where our staff are equipped with questions and resources. And we know in this month, here's what the focus of advisory is. And it's happening not in a few classes, but in all classes. And that is something that we certainly need to work with our teachers to provide them with the support so that that can be something that they build out. And then finally, we know that there are additional, well, hold on, not even finally, two other things. One, we know that there are going to be students that need a higher level of support. I can't tell you how many emails I've received from parents that just broke my heart when parents talked about, my child misses school so much, or my child has anxiety, and, you know, the idea that they would go back and have to wear a mask and things like that. And so we are very clear that we are going to work with every single family, every parent, to try to build a program that works for their child. And so certainly it starts with the principal, it starts with the teacher, but I am certainly here. Ed Clark, our director of student support services, is available. All of our psychologists and school counselors and social workers are all available because academics matter. And I am not going to tell you that academics don't matter. But if kids aren't social emotionally well, we can have the best lessons, we can have the best technology, but students will not be available and ready to engage because these other things are interrupting and preventing them from being able to participate. So we need to make sure that we get this right. We know that there are going to be some kids that have higher needs, either kids that have 504s, kids that have IEPs, but social emotional support for everybody is the right thing to do. And it has been proven that it increases students' ability to learn, it increases their performance, and that performance lasts over a number of years. So it's absolutely the right thing. The last thing I would mention is that we have a number of community members that reached out to us in light of all of the events that have happened this summer with the killing of George Floyd and other individuals. And it is something that our kids are really, you know, asking about and reached out to their teachers about. it is important for everyone in our community to know that when we think about issues of identity and wellness and cultural competence, all of these things are tied in some way to how students view themselves and how they understand their place in the larger society. We need all of our students to understand that they have a place, that the community supports them, and that they're going to be supported, and that we don't have an environment where bullying for any reason would be allowed to occur. Next slide. So we also talk about some things that right now we have placeholders, but we don't have firm numbers. So let me just share a couple. We know that we're going to have to hire temporary staff. So these would be people that would work temporarily just to get us through this. So we're going to need additional folks on buses, as well as those people would also help with lunch. We know we need additional, we actually don't need additional. We need, hire health aides because we don't currently have any. They'll work with our nurses. Teacher fellows are individuals that would serve both as substitute teachers and TAs in our buildings. And we know that we are going to have a need for additional custodial hours, and how we go about that. We have to continue to have conversations. We are absolutely buying as much protective equipment as we can find. And we're going to use some of the federal dollars that have been provided to buy that, including partitions, sanitizing stations, wipes, masks, things like that. Thus far, in terms of technology, we have signed off on an order for 1,600 new Chromebooks. We have another 1,200 that we are going to order. We have to provide a Chromebook for every student K-5, as well as 6 through 12. And we're going to use some of that technology funding to do that. It really is a game changer for us in terms of our ability to very quickly. And I think our chairperson mentioned something earlier, and I sort of echoed that, the ability to be flexible. We're going to need to be flexible. We may start in one model of instruction, something happens, and over the weekend have to move to another. Well, we can only move to another model of instruction if we have the resource available so that students in their elementary classes could take their Chromebooks with them that weekend, because over the week on Monday, we're starting full distance learning. These are the types of things and the contingencies and the flexibility that we have to have in place. And then we certainly are thinking about a policy. It is a recommendation from the Department of Education. It's something that our school committee has discussed, and we will be working on that in the near future. Next slide. So then a couple of other next steps for reopening. And really, we hope to get feedback tomorrow. I love the little pathway. Continued outreach to families and schools. Families have identified their preferred model for a return. Staff have identified their comfort level. We need to finalize schedules and staffing, determine transportation needs, professional development, especially for distance learning, kindergarten orientation, and then back to school staff and family meetings, which we will begin having those starting tomorrow. Next slide. So just to give some sense of what families have said, so we asked families to give us a response to whether or not families wanted to participate in distance learning for health reasons. And 26% of the respondents said yes, that they believe that their student needed to participate in distance learning for health reasons. So I would just take, out of 668, take about 25% out of that number, right? So you're going to get somewhere around 150, 160 odd students, maybe a little bit more. Next slide. staff comfort, right? And so staff comfort in returning to school. So one of the questions that we, it shouldn't be staff. Yeah, so this isn't staff comfort. That's a typo. Please excuse us for that. It's actually not staff comfort, but it's the parents' comfort in their child returning to school. Out of 668 responses, I want distance learning for my student because I'm not comfortable sending them back, right? Of that, 76% of the responses said yes. We think it puts us somewhere over 500 people are suggesting that they want distance learning for their student. Next slide, and we'll change that on all futures. We should have caught that earlier. In terms of requesting distance learning, I'm requesting distance learning for once the decision to opt into distance learning has been made, only a request to the superintendent and building principal can modify. For the first trimester for elementary, about 38% of the 535 responses were elementary students, 38% were middle and high school, and we even had some people that asked for the entire year, about 22% of that number. All right, next. So staff response to what they preferred. So in terms of full in school, 33% of staff wanted full in school. Partial in school, 30% wanted that. 20% wanted limited in school, and 16% of the 206 responses asked for full distance. We have 400, our last count was today actually. I had the Chief Operating Officer, Tina Fogel, run the numbers. So we believe that we have 425 FTEs, and we had 200, about half, a little less than half of the individuals responded, and that's their response. Next. In terms of professional learning or professional development, we know that we need to build on the promising practices that we found in the spring. Many of our teachers, took to it and were really, really accomplished with the work that they did in distance learning. But we also know that there's an opportunity to grow, especially as we think about synchronous teaching, where staff are teaching both the students in front of them as well as the students that are at home. And so we're going to provide professional development for that, as well as for interactive learning strategies. In this environment, folks, and I mentioned this to teachers last year at Back to School, but it certainly has been borne out. We need to make sure that learning is both educationally sound, engaging, and interactive, because when you have all of those components, then you've captured students' imaginations, and they're going to work with us. And when we don't do those things, it makes the learning environment that much more difficult. We also know that we need to provide professional development for managing digital content, and as well as for formative assessments. And that's something that I know Tom Driscoll is working with, and we think we have some dates scheduled. I want to say August the 10th and 11th on a volunteer basis. And then we also will have some dates when all staff return, which will be, I think, the week of, some days during the week of August the 20, that next week after the 17th. So what is that? The 23rd, 24th. Next slide. Transportation needs. So out of the 1,148 students represented, 73% said that they need transportation. And so that's a good number for us to start. It looks like we're probably going to have to call families one by one, just because if they have not responded. And the reason why is because we need to make sure that we've got a spot for every student. And if not, we have to then figure out what our alternatives will be. Thank you. Next slide. We just decided this today, and so this is hot off the presses. So we have been getting a number of calls for kindergarten orientation. And so we needed to speak with our elementary principals, but here's what we decided today. So we actually are going to continue to enroll our kindergarten students, and they're going to begin school with everybody else, but that first week of school for them is going to be a half day of school. During that time, it will allow students time to adjust and the teachers to complete the beginning of the year assessments and class assignments. And so we think that's the right way to begin our kindergarten students. I know that was a lot to digest. Again, I'd like to thank all of our staff that has been working so hard to do this, all of the parents that have sent in questions and given us their feedback. And with that, I would like to take questions as well as members of my team. So I know Dr. Santa is going to take questions from that deal with detailed related to curriculum. We're going to have Tina Fogel, the Chief Operating Officer, who's going to take questions related to transportation. We're going to have Ed Clark take questions related to socio-emotional learning and other supports for students. Rose Muller, who will take questions for technology, and the rest will play it by ear. Let's say, so we have about 40 questions, but you know what I want to do? I actually want to stop talking for a minute and let's get some questions from the audience, and then we will go back to those questions toward the end of this. All right, I see two participants have their hand raised. Ms. Brown.
I'm going to have to ask my tech team for help as I list or name the people off to ask them to unmute. I'm going to start with Ms. Shannon Gray.
So this is not the question I emailed in. This is actually a different question. So my daughter's school no longer has collaborative classrooms, which would mean there was a regular and a special educator in the classroom at all times. And I'm just wondering how this is going to work with the stable pods to get their special ed services if the special educator is going to be servicing kids from a bunch of pods.
Yeah, so I think first and foremost, it's something that we need to look at, but we certainly don't think that we have changed our model. So will we have special educators? Absolutely. Will they provide support? The only question is making sure that the teachers are not that special educator that may serve multiple classrooms, to make sure that, you know, the number of total people in that particular stable group is beneath the threshold that the Department of Health has provided. But we certainly will make sure that occurs. If not, students would not get the services that they are required to get.
Can I add on to that a little bit, Dr. Bryce?
Yep, absolutely.
And speaking with some of my colleagues in the East Bay as well, looking at ideas on how to do this, and not just for academic services, for speech and language, OT, PT, where we're going to have students in multiple stable groups. And one of the ideas that came up that I'm exploring and discussing now is having a special educator assigned to a classroom or a team, but allowing students from other teams to enter those small groups virtually. When it comes time for a small reading group, a student in another classroom may go to the back of the room, log in at the back of the room and participate in that small group. So right now we're taking a look at numbers. We still have to wait and see how many families will choose in-person or virtual, if those are options. But that's just an example of some of the specific ideas that we're looking at.
The next person I see is Brian Chidester, BWEA.
Hi, thank you, Dr. Bryce, for the presentation. I just wanted to state here for the record that it is the position of the BWEA leadership that we are in favor of starting the year in distance learning and phasing into in-person learning as appropriate, given the conditions on the ground. Now, this I know is not the position of the governor. It's not the position of the superintendents, which I understand is slightly different from the position of the governor. But I just wanted to give some updated data because Dr. Bryce shared some data about the staff survey. The BWEA has also been surveying our members. In June, we found that 33% of our members were not comfortable going back into the classroom and 66% were. In July, we asked the same question mid-July, about a week and a half ago, and the numbers had shifted. 60% of teachers were not comfortable going back to the classroom and 40% of teachers were. We had a general membership meeting where we shared some of the experience of the reopening meetings and what we knew of the plan at that point last Thursday. We surveyed our members one last time. We asked a slightly different question this time, which was, which opening do you prefer? Distance learning with phased in person, which is our the leadership's preferred model of the union. The hybrid model, which is, as we understand, what the superintendents are throughout the state are in favor of, or a full in-person reopening, which of course is what the governor is in favor of. We found that 80% of teachers, and the BWEA includes also school nurses and social workers and guidance counselors, 80% of our members are in favor of starting the year with distance learning and phasing into an in-person model as appropriate given the conditions on the ground. Another, I believe 13% are in favor of a hybrid model, and 6 to 7%, or slightly, maybe it's more like 15% for the hybrid and about 5% for the full in-person model. So I just wanted to update those statistics and to make the community aware that from the teachers' position, we are in favor of starting with distance learning. Not that we think it's the best. Obviously, we all want to be in class with our students. We think that that's when learning is most effective. But given the conditions of the pandemic, given the issues of health and safety, we feel that a beginning with distance learning would simplify the beginning of the school year, make it easier to ease into the school year. And that's our position. I think Dr. Bryce and the school committee are aware of that, but I just wanted to make that statement for the community here.
Thank you very much. I believe that the next person that I see a hand raised is Sherry Lehane.
Hi. Thank you again for the presentation. I had a question if I wanted to clarify from Dr. Bryce's presentation. For those who opt in, assuming that we have the option of distance learning, those students who are at home doing distance learning, will they be joining virtually the in-person classes? Or are those two separate learning experiences?
So that's a great question. We actually think at secondary level that it would likely be joining the in-person class. At the elementary level, depending on numbers, we believe that it may be separate teachers that are teaching on the distance learning platform. And so I think it is going to be driven by need, by parent request, and by teacher need. Somehow those two numbers have to come together. And once we have figured out exactly how many teachers have it's a pre-existing medical condition that and RIDE will, excuse me, not even RIDE. I think it's the Department of Health sets the threshold. Once they have identified what that threshold is, then we will know roughly how many staff members are impacted. And then we will build out the distance learning cadre of staff that would be available to teach students. Parents choose the distance learning option. Tina, I don't know if I missed anything in that.
I mean, I think that's correct. I think we're waiting for guidance, and obviously we'll be looking at the ADA and all other, applicable state and federal laws.
Yeah. From my daughter's in the middle school, and I felt like one of the things that was could use some improvement is more interactivity with other students. So if that's the case, that would speak to it. I also think that's a very special set of skills to be able to facilitate both in person and virtually. So yeah. And then I would just wanted to make one other comment for some, I also work in education myself, is that consistency among teachers can help students navigate the distance learning experience so much easier. So whether there's more consistency in tools or how assignments are posted, or some of the logistics, I think would lessen the cognitive load of students.
Absolutely, Sherry. And
Yeah.
you know what? Part of this is helping students to know what to expect, because once they know what to expect, then I think we're perfect. Sorry, but once we know what to expect, I think that is where we want to be. We want to make sure that they know the lessons, and we got this later in the spring, but once we got it, we saw classes really meeting with success, that they figured out, they posted, and a lot of the co-curriculars, they posted their assignments for the week. So it gave students the opportunity to work on those assignments when it was most comfortable for them. And if anybody's got a teenager, right? My teenager might not be as happy a camper at 9 in the morning as opposed to 9 in the evening when they're doing the assignment. And I think for some of this, what we now realize is the direct instruction piece of this we need to do, but we also need to give students some flexibility so they can complete the assignments on their own. And I think it speaks to, Sherry, it speaks to what you mentioned.
Dr. Bryce.
Thank you.
Dr. Bryce, could I just follow up quickly?
Absolutely.
And I just want to add that we saw a lot of very strong practices during distance learning, and we have some artifacts of work. We also had a group of teachers, they were called our Promising Practices Group, and they shared their thoughts on distance learning and what worked well. We had survey data from parents and from students. And so from that, we've developed guidance on distance learning. And to your point, we do want to have consistency in how things are posted so that it's clear for students going from classroom to classroom. They shouldn't have to spend time looking for things. It should be right there for them. So those are all things that we're working on and that will be part of our professional development this summer.
And I think the one thing that I would continue to say, our teachers did a phenomenal job with distance learning, and our students did a great job. So any of the process improvements we're talking about are about improving our outcomes, not because we feel like anybody didn't do something. Completely uncharted territory, but we really feel like we set the state standard, and I believe that Rhode Island set a national standard for the effectiveness of distance learning new material, and supporting all kids.
Okay.
I see hands up.
Yep, so I have a few, as I wrote them down. Bill Bullard, I believe, if tech can help.
Hi, hope you can hear me. Thank you very much for letting me speak. Also, I want to extend my thanks to the school system and the school committee in general for the excellent job done during the spring. Having had to make the transition myself on a week's notice teaching at the War College, I know how hard it was, and just a great job all around. And thanks for the plan showing that it's hard work thinking through things like this, and there are rarely excellent solutions, but this is very well thought out.
Thank you.
My one question is on compulsory versus optional mask wearing. I think the decision in high school for compulsory mask wearing is a very good one, given how the students mix in everything. I wonder if it shouldn't be the same for middle school. There's recent studies coming out, a study that came out of Korea, which is one of the countries that has handled COVID best in the world, that shows that adults ages 10 to 19 are almost as likely, maybe almost as likely and easily transmitting COVID-19 as adults, even though they're asymptomatic. And if they're only in a group for 7 hours of a day in a class of say 15, the remaining 17, they're in 15 separate groups. And then who knows what they're doing after that. So you're really not having a stable group all day. You're bringing in combinations of groups. And it's been known for a while that sitting in a non-open space, even with only a dozen people in 6 feet apart and talking and exhaling particles in an airborne disease, is still, even according to Dr. Fauci, one of the more dangerous things that you can do. So I'm just wondering how, and there may be something I don't know in all of this, and I'm willing to hear it, that we come to optional mask wear in a cohort of kids who are in the 12 and 13-year-old range is okay for 7 hours a day. And thank you.
So thank you. I think your question highlights the difficulty. I wish one of our nurses was here. I think the question highlights the difficulty that we're having. We want to require mask wearing because everything that we read from the CDC before it decided to not be focused on the science, from certainly Dr. Alexander and her team at the Rhode Island Department of Health, everything that we see says wearing masks helps to prevent the spread of the virus. The issue is whether or not we can rightly expect students to sit in a classroom for all hours of the day and wear masks the whole time. So let me tell you the experience Dr. Santa and I had. So a Friday morning, we go and we are on the top floor of an elementary school. We've got our masks. There are 4 people. They're like 4 people, and we were there for 30 minutes. And can I just tell you, I was like, I think this is going to be really difficult for our kiddos to have to wear masks all day, every day. And I think that is why we have to create opportunities for them to get outside, potentially learn outside, to just take a walk outside and be far enough away from each other so they can take their mask off. And so I think that is something that we are looking into, but we don't have easy answers. I do think that our default is that everybody wears a mask. So that's where we start. And then if you find yourself in places where you are in a stable group and you are socially distant, then you may have the option of removing your mask. But as soon as you either get within the 6 feet or are walking in a common area, your mask has to go back on. But I think it's the right question to ask.
All right, thank you. I think I had a follow-up, but not right now. Thanks. Like I said,
Okay.
difficult question. But I mean, what if somebody? I mean, so does that include like refusal to wear one outright? I guess I do have a follow-up or something like that. What happens if somebody refuses in a mandatory place?
So I think we are going to. Our goal is to work with all students and families. It is very clear that RIDE does not want students punished or given a consequence, is a better term, for refusing to wear masks. And I think that is why our school committee is taking the step to consider a policy, because once there is a policy, that actually changes the decision point around whether or not whether or not there's flexibility in terms of students wearing masks and what the district can do in terms of consequences. We certainly believe that this is a health and safety issue, and I think we're going to have to talk to students. Our nurses have said that they want to start an education campaign to make sure, just like we spent time last year helping students to learn how to wash their hands for 20 seconds using hot water, using soap, just like we want to spend time doing that. I think our nurses are also going to want to spend time helping students to understand why the importance of why wearing masks makes sense. And if we do that, we believe that we will have very few students that refuse to comply. All right.
Okay. Going down the list, I believe the next person is Kate Sylvia.
Hi, good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for the presentation, for all of the information. I had just some clarifying questions around the process for entry into the building and what that essentially that new kind of routine is going to look like, how you're going to facilitate the surveys and how they're going to be managed. And then I also know that the CDC doesn't currently recommend screenings kind of universally, but if that's been part of the process of you guys discussing kind of flexibility and what things might shift and change, or how we might be positioned to support that if that becomes an ask.
So let me take the second part of that. Okay, so I got really bad feedback. So the second part of that is we had to make a decision about what information we were going to use to build our plan. And as we know, the information keeps evolving, but we are uncertain about the legitimacy of some of the information, frankly. And let me just tell you, I'm the father of two little girls, right? Although one's 20, one's 14, they're still little to me. Absolutely, and I've got grandkids. We're not going to take risk with children and staff. That is not what we want to do. And so we believe that the guidance about 6 feet is the gold standard, and that's what we're going to attempt to follow. All right. And so the second part of what was the first part of your question?
So the first part was more about just the routine, how you're going to be submitting surveys and how parents are going to be expected to complete them, if that's digitally, on site, how you guys are managing that, and kind of the specifics around what you think you're going to ask.
Yep. So I'm gonna start, and then I'm gonna give it to Tina. Right now, we think that there are gonna be three sort of entry points. We believe that there will be some sort of, we call it an attestation form, that parents will be able to access using the parent portal. And you'll see the questions, and parents would be able to just say, hey, you know what? This is, Jonathan Bryce, no fever today, no cough, no other symptoms, good to go. Press, none of the above, and hit submit, and you're done. We know that there will be some parents that may not have access to the parent portal, and they would need a paper copy, and there will be paper copies for them to fill out and to submit. And then we also believe that that students that show up at the bus that have not completed their forms, our individuals will be at the bus. They will have iPads or other technology, and they'll be able to very quickly assess whether or not the student has completed that form, that student and parent have completed the form. If they haven't, then they'll work to address that while they are trying to load students onto the bus. I think that is the sum total of what we have thought of at this point, but we continue to look at it. And while the CDC does not now require a daily check-in, we think anything less is an unnecessary risk for students and staff.
Got it. So just so that I'm clear, I want to make sure, because I heard you talk about the kind of 6-foot gold standard. I appreciate that. I think that's fantastic. But with respect to potential additional screening beyond just an attestation form, have you guys discussed whether or not as a school we should be screening students and staff pre-entry? And I'm taking taking a few, like a temperature.
Yeah, so we have discussed that. Initially, we thought we'd do that, and we actually want the parents and the staff to take their own temperatures, right? Prior to entry. We don't, so I want everybody, here is the best analogy that I can share. If anybody has flown, not out of TF Green, but out of Boston Logan and been in a TSA line, that is what entry to all of our buildings would look like if we physically screened every student upon entry at the door. So it would probably take us, 300 kids, even if you do a kid every 30 seconds, right? It's going to take you some time, and you do 3 entry points. And so what we want to do is, we believe that parents are going to be able to complete the attestation form and be able to say, yep, they'll be able to complete that and share that with us. And so that's the plan. Tina?
Sure. So I think we're going to create reports so that the buildings will know because we know, just like anything else, mornings are busy and someone may forget. It's not intentional. So we'll have checkpoints where students will, those students who have not filled out the attestation form on their way in will be screened by people who are trained for that. We're going to do an education push to talk to parents about the importance of screening. Again, bus transportation will have trained BWRSD employees who will have access to the screening module. And if a student has not been screened prior to getting on the bus, that screening will occur. And so we're trying to come up with different processes and procedures, I think, to avoid the logjam that we're worried about, because obviously we want instruction to happen once kids get to school. So we don't think that we have every single issue covered yet, but as we go through this plan and we figure out, we're working with each of the buildings to find out, okay, how many entry points are you going to have? How many staff do we need to have at each entry point? What's the information that you need to have as students enter the building, so that we can ensure that students are screened and that they don't enter the building. I thought that, we've discussed that transportation screening was really important, obviously, because kids are getting on a closed bus. And so we obviously want to make sure that that's not the only priority, but that is a priority as students get on a bus. And because there's a transportation pod and an instruction pod, we don't want one student to infect, many other pods. So screening for transportation, I think, is going to be very important for us. And again, we're going to work with each of the buildings to discuss their parent drop-off and bus drop-off to make sure that we catch every student that has not yet been screened, and then take the appropriate protocols, whether it's calling home based on the age of the student or conducting the screening ourselves if we believe that the student can appropriately answer the questions.
Great. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. Madam Chair, I see that the time is 8:15. I am certain that we've got more questions. The hour, draws near. I think we should move to extend our time.
All right, we reading, boys?
Thank you. Yes, I see that. I think we have, I'm not sure if I can see everyone. I see 5 hands raised at the beginning of my participant screen here. So I'm wondering, we have till 8:30 on the agenda, and I think you're right. We may have to extend a half an hour if we need to, at that point, I think we should plan a meeting for next week for follow-up questions in the same kind of a Q&A forum.
Well, and the one other thing, just to remind everyone, that we are beginning town hall conversations about reopening with every school beginning tomorrow. I think we start with Rockwell. Kate Brown, I don't know what the schedule is.
So Wednesday this week, so you were right, Tuesday is Rockwell. Wednesday this week is Mount Hope. And Thursday this week, I believe, is Hugh Cole. Then following week, Tuesday is Gutierrez. Wednesday is KMS. And Thursday is the last school, Colt Andrews.
Got it. It's been a day. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay. So following that lead, should we go through these hands that are raised? I do know that we also have another hand raised as well, Mr. Brian Bradshaw. So you're on my list as well. So I think the next person is Tanya. I'm asking you to unmute. Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi.
Hi, how are you?
I'm excellent.
Very good. I'm a school bus driver, and so I had a couple of questions, and I just know if you or the governor were aware that for even transportation to be possible, was that every driver needs to be recertified yearly to get our school bus certificates, and they expire on August 31st. They were extended from June 30th. And as of right now, I do not believe our manager has heard from CCRI as to when we're even going to get recertified because of the state of Rhode Island. Need to have that. I just wasn't sure if that was taken into consideration. That was one question. And the other one was just if the parents didn't complete the form, as the kids get on the buses, traffic is going to be delayed even more so, if I don't know how quickly this screening is going to be, as kids board the buses, that the staff is going to be asking them questions. And if they don't know the answer, like what's kind of going to happen here?
So, couple of things. So first of all, Tanya, thank you for being a bus driver. All right. And getting our kids to and from school safely. I think the Superintendents Association, our meetings that I attend, as well as my leadership team and leadership teams and superintendents from around the state, we certainly know about the issue of driver certification. And we believe that the bus companies and the state are in the process of trying to work through something that would address that. For a long time, the facility wasn't even open for drivers to be able to go and get recertified. We believe that it recently just reopened, but clearly it means there's a backlog, right? So we know that they're going to try to work through that. I think the issue for us in the morning, whether or not a student has completed, or the family has completed the attestation form, and how long that takes. We know it's going to take some time. We recognize that what it's going to mean is that one of the reasons why we want to add additional staff and add another monitor to the bus is so that that process can be handled as quickly as possible. And certainly hope that parents send students to the bus stop having completed the form, either in paper copy or hopefully online, so that we very quickly will know 5 kids at the bus stop. Of the 5, 4, we see the form has been completed, the kids are fine, and the 1 kid, our monitors will have a phone, they'll have an iPad, and they'll be able to very quickly talk to the parent and get that information. And so that's the plan. Now, in the event that we don't, and because we had to plan for this, we actually, all students and everybody on the bus is going to have a mask. But
Right.
we also know that, and I'm going to let Tina weigh in because I don't want to misspeak on that, but my understanding is that we're going to have what amounts to an isolation seat, and that student will be there, and so that as soon as they get to the building, they would be taken off the bus, and they would go right to a room where they would wait until the nurse or the nurse tech could screen them. Tina?
Correct. So obviously, we're hoping that our techs will be trained on the bus, so they'll be able to provide the screening in a efficient manner. We agree that we understand it's going to be a time delay, and we conservatively estimated that bus routes could be added an extra 20 minutes by the time a student is screened if they need to be hand sanitizer, masked, and sat in their assigned. Understand that, and we believe that as the year progresses, obviously, just like anything else, we're used to the routine, it will go quicker. So obviously, the first few weeks will, be a little longer, but we will provide the bus with technology so that they can call ahead to the school if there is a concern regarding a student. Because they could not screen them for whatever reason. I think about maybe a kindergarten student who maybe doesn't understand, doesn't feel comfortable, answering the questions. There will be a protocol by which that student will sit up front, will wear their mask.
Okay, so they're out on the bus regardless.
Yes.
I know the bus driver's concerns were, if this kid hasn't been screened, we can't send them home, with no, who's going to be responsible? How is this all going to work? So this is terrific. At least we know.
Yeah, and we obviously had gone back and forth, and obviously we feel the same way. No matter if they're 6 or 16, we would never leave a student at the bus, right? I mean,
That's right.
I stop and drive away.
Unacceptable.
I tried to figure out what the best way in order to ensure everyone's safety was, and that's why we figured a seat at the front of the bus, sitting with the tech, masked, call to the school right away to let them know X number of students are coming that have not yet been screened, and that there'll be a staff member from the school that will meet the bus, escort those students to the appropriate area. We know it's not perfect, but that's the best for the health and safety of everyone, and to ensure that we're not, in the middle of winter leaving a student at the bus stop. We would never do that. So
that's right.
That's like taboo. We cannot leave students. If they're there, we cannot leave them. And we would, if all of a sudden they got screened and they had a temperature, what do you?
Exactly. So again, that comes back to the student would be on the bus. They would be sitting at the front in an isolation seat. They would, as soon as we got to the building, they would be asked to step off the bus. They would go with the staff right into the isolation room, where the nurse or the nurse tech would work with them, call the parent, and have the parent come and get the student right away. I think this is another opportunity to just share with folks. All right, as parents, we probably have all done this. We have all said the importance of students sort of toughing it out and going to school, even if you have the sniffles or you're a little under the weather. We have to change that mindset. We now know that given what we are dealing with, that when students have any of those common cold symptoms, they need to stay home for a few days and get over them. That's why it's so vital that we have the ability to very flexibly move from it physically in person to distance learning, because we're going to need them to stay home.
Perfect. Well,
Right. Well, that sounds like a really good plan. I'm sure you've just you've relieved a lot of stress off a lot of bus drivers' shoulders. And, thank you for allowing me to speak. I really appreciate it. I thought your presentation was spot on. And, thank you for putting in so much hard work.
Thank you. Well, and don't forget, I'm just the face man, right? Yeah. I've got a great team behind me. I've got 60 people that have just read over every document and just thought through all of the ideas. And then we've got folks in the community, such as yourself, that are giving us different ideas. So it really is a team effort. But thank you.
Well, thank you and, your whole team. I mean, it's moving along. So there is progress. So I just, again, thank you for letting me ask my questions. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Ellen, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you. How are you?
I'm okay.
I'm sorry, I was here. I just didn't have my video on, and I stepped away for a second, and then I came back and saw if school nurses were here. But we're here. There's a number of us here. So if you have a question, I'll do my best to answer it.
You got it. Thank you for being here, and the rest of the nurses.
Great. The next person on the list that has their hand raised is Elizabeth Sousa. Okay.
Okay.
I think it would work.
Hi.
Yep.
Okay, Dr. Bryce, earlier there was a gentleman who was speaking about how the teachers, how the teachers feel about them not feeling comfortable, coming back to school because of the safety issues. With their concerns, is it only up to the governor to be able to say that we can do distance learning, or can you say that Bristol Warren is going to do distance learning?
Yeah, so great question. Thanks for being here, Elizabeth. So the decision is not left up to school superintendents or school committees for that matter. The decision about what model we're going to be in is really going to be left up to the governor, the commissioner, and the director of Dr. Alexander from the Department of Health. Those are the individuals that are making decisions. Now, they have assured us that they're going to make decisions based on the available science and conditions on the ground. But they have not said that school superintendents have the decision-making authority, right? So if you think about a snow day and making that decision, we weigh a lot of variables. But ultimately, I pick up the phone and I call the chair and I say, I'm about to close schools today, or we're going to have a 2-hour delay. That's our decision. In this case, that decision is not a local decision. It is a statewide decision, just like the decision to close in March, to move that vacation week up and use that as the retooling week, and then to go full distance learning.
Okay, thank you so much. And
you're welcome.
Kudos to all the teachers, because I mean, and you too. Well, I mean, the spring was awesome with the
Thank you.
learning.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Next, I see Michelle.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi. So I have a child that's going into kindergarten, and I have 2 questions. One, I'd like to know, what do you plan on doing to support those kindergarten children on, those first few weeks of school, the ones who don't want to come into the classroom, they're crying, they want their moms, their dads. I imagine at this point, the teachers are not going to be able to console them like they would before, hug them, sit on the rug with them, read them a book, whatever it may be that helps them feel better. That's my first question. So, and then my second question is, what will the kindergarten classrooms look like? Because I've been in one, and for the most part, they have the 3 or 4 big tables, at least at Kateris, that they sit at together as a group, and then around that classroom is centers. Will they have to get rid of the centers to make room for desks that are 6 feet apart?
So a couple of things. So number one, first of all, congratulations on being a kindergarten mom.
Thank you.
And so we are as excited to have our kindergartners return to school as any of our students. We know it's really special, but we also know that the first couple of weeks getting used to it are always tearjerkers. It's always emotional. I think we're going to do a couple of things. I think first and foremost, I think the idea of that first week being part-time or half-time, we'll make sure that they get lunch I think is going to help to smooth out the transition. And then we'll start building up that stamina of them attending for longer periods of time. I think elementary teachers, I think kindergarten teachers are going to come up with ways to work with kids in small groups or the entire class. They will also have, all of our kindergarten classes will have a TA. And so there'll be other adults in the class. And I think they're going to figure out ways to work with them. I don't think they are going to be as close as they have been in the past, which is a shame because, kindergarten teachers are just, that's sort of what they do. In terms of the structure of the classroom, right now we are looking at whether or not the tables, whether or not students sitting at opposite ends of the table would be 6 feet apart, because if they would, that would solve one of our problems, and we'd have them all facing in the same direction towards the teacher. And so we're looking at that. We also know that we may have some additional furniture. And then even today, I think one of our elementary principals and one of the teachers sent us a diagram of a potential redesigned kindergarten classroom that did have some of the stations removed so that it created more space. I don't know if Diane, if you want to add anything to that.
Sure. Thank you for the question, Michelle. Great question.
You're
So some of the models that we've been looking at have more flexible furniture. Obviously, we don't want young children just sitting in a hard desk all day, especially the little ones. So the diagram that we saw had some flexible furniture around the room so that they were seated low to the ground, and they had one of those plastic lap desks going over it. Obviously, we'd have to wipe them down after different students use them, but the goal is that we want kids to be able to have different spaces within the classroom. Also, just this week, we saw some plexiglass partitions, flexible ones that could be put up between students so that we can still keep some of our tables. So there are a lot of options out there. We're also working with a local manufacturer who makes plexiglass partitions. And so we're looking at all of those options as well. So we have amazing kindergarten teachers and early childhood teachers that I know are thinking through options, because every day we seem to be getting something else sent to us. And there's a lot of excitement about what we can do to still make learning relevant and enjoyable for young children.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Right. Next on the list, I see Elizabeth's iPad.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Hi, thank you very much, Dr. Bryce, for your presentation.
Thank you.
Everybody for all the work. I know this is pretty consuming. And also was super excited to hear that all students will have Chromebooks. I think that will be a huge relief for a lot of families that actually were afraid or reluctant to ask for extra technology, even though they were splitting laptops and telephones and everything among several family members in the spring. So that's a great relief. There was actually a question that I had from somebody else, and it was mainly about the young kids. And so some of this was touched on by some of the other people, starting with masks. Originally, I had heard that kindergarten through maybe first grade weren't going to be required to wear masks. That's no longer true.
So I can't speak to the idea that at some point there were students that were not required to wear a mask. In our plan that we submitted to RIDE, we actually had everybody in the building, staff and students, are going to be required to wear a mask. And it is not until students are at the elementary level, are sitting down in their stable groups, that the teacher will give them the option of removing their mask.
Okay. So all the way down to kindergarten. I think for the
Yeah,
young.
and it's so difficult. Elizabeth, you know, one of the things, excuse me, that we really are taking into account. Again, some of the parents that have just sent me emails and just said, you know, I've got really young kids, asking them to keep a mask on all day is impossible. That's why we came up with the option that once they're inside and in their stable groups, they would have the option of removing their mask. And as long as they're sitting there, then they would not need to wear their mask. But we know it's going to be difficult. And so we're going to also have to work with teachers to make sure that they're giving them opportunities to continue to be far apart and to remove their mask at some point.
All right. And then kind of following on that, if their mask is off, needing to remain 6 feet apart. So again, like with the kindergarten through second or third grade, that's going to be the difficult part, because how kids are at that age. I mean, if they're going to have to stay 6 feet apart in these separate desks and not move and eat their lunch there, and it seems to mount to be something that's not very realistic for how kids are.
So so let me just say, I think our students are very responsive to direction and will work once we have established rituals and routines, they'll work with that. I'm going to mention, and we have joked about it, but can I just tell you, we've seen it in at least 2 countries where they have had, it's like the floaty devices, like the noodle devices, and they
on their head.
yeah, right. And we laugh about it, but the reason why it actually might work for really little kids is because it's the reminder for little kids, oh, I shouldn't be that close to the student sitting next to me. I shouldn't be, right? Whereas older kids hopefully wouldn't need that level of reminder. Can I tell you, are we concerned about it? We absolutely are concerned. That's why we also think the procuring dividers, table dividers, is going to be really important, because then that's another opportunity for really little kids to be able to sit, to learn, and not have a mask on.
And also, Dr. Bryce, just to remind everyone, the idea of outdoor learning spaces, we think that that's critical. Also for elementary students, making sure that there's maybe extra time for recess. We're strongly suggesting that for teachers, especially at the start of the school year as everyone's transitioning to this, that we want to make sure that children do have that space and being able to, when they're, far apart at recess, being able to socially distance. And I saw a great use of hula hoops on the ground for students to have that sense of space. So I think it's going to take us all time to get used to this. But I think those are questions that I know our elementary teachers are thinking of, and we'll work with them to come up with the best solutions.
So it looks like we need to, I think we're having another procurement conversation tomorrow. So it looks like hula hoops and flotation devices. Okay.
Yeah. So recess, will that be just socially distanced, but otherwise it's planned to go on as before?
Yeah, we certainly.
Yeah, I was just going to say, the elementary principals are coming up with different scenarios, and one of them might be a rotation. Each day there would be a different rotation where one group would use the playground structures. We would wash them down in between classes or in between recesses. And then there are other outdoor play activities going on. And so groups would rotate through those things. But yes, the expectation is that they still keep their distance. So it's up to us as the teacher assistants to use their knowledge of different outdoor activities so that we're creating those models for kids. and encouraging them to, get out there and have fun and be active and enjoy the outdoors, but at the same time, not doing the types of things they were doing before is probably a little too close to one another.
Yep.
So the things like in the classroom, if they were to put their mask back on, can they be within 6 feet of each other?
So
say if it
we
was an
actually think, yeah, so I think the answer to that is yes, the guidance does specify that students could actually be closer as long as they're masked. And our concern is, we want to the best of our ability, utilize what we think is the best standard. And we think the best standard is 6 feet of distance.
Okay. But just thinking that how the students typically in those grades are really spend a lot of time on the floor. So is that going away, or can they still
that will
use
be modified in some ways. One of the things that we're taking is, so if you walk into our elementary buildings, I would argue that I would say in pretty much every classroom, teachers have used their own funds to buy like really great rugs for the floor. We are taking those up. We are securing those just because we need, right now, we don't want one of the recommendations was to remove those types of materials. We're not able to clean them to the level we're not able to clean them to a place where we feel like the rugs won't potentially harbor, germs or whatever, even though they would be clean, in the summer for the school year. So we're actually removing them right now, and we're going to store them or have the teachers come in and take them. And so will there be floor time? Yes, but it will look a little different.
Okay. I guess it's going to be a lot to get used to, I think, for everybody.
Absolutely.
I guess the last question then about classrooms, that's all classrooms, but maybe specifically elementary. So for ventilation, were there any guidelines for the, or was there anything that you submitted to the state about do's and don'ts for ventilation? Are fans allowed, the AC, windows open, etc.?
Yeah, so, all right, so a couple of things. Number one, so the ventilation, so we've got our director of facilities, George Simmons, is here somewhere. So, one of the things we do every summer is we replace all the filters. So we certainly are doing that. The air conditioning in those buildings is gonna clearly be operating in buildings where there is no air conditioning. Staff will be able, and we figured this out today. The issue of fans, we got a response from RIDE that fans were permissible. The question that we now have to face is the district going to provide fans in those classrooms, or do teachers provide fans? We don't have an answer yet, but it is something that we're looking at. But we did get permission for fans in those places today. And so it's something that we will look into.
All right. And I'm sure that, so it's about.
Yep. And don't forget, I've got 6 town halls. So if you've got more questions, either email them to me or save them for the town hall, but I'll answer them. And if you just want to shoot me an email, shoot me an email. And
no problem on that. So did the state, like in terms of contact tracing or anything, I mean, I appreciate the idea of having a survey for like student wellness coming in, but we're pretty much assuming that most students will be asymptomatic, even in the high school. So we're probably more concerned about students' families and where they're at. And then maybe like, as soon as you know of somebody that is positive, the contact tracing, or what happens if we know a staff member is positive, or somebody in the family or a student tests positive, what will happen?
Okay, so So Elizabeth, that has to be your last question.
Yes, it is.
All right. So George, do you want to take the piece about the HVAC system? And then Ellen, do you want to take the question about contact tracing?
Sure. Can you hear me, Dr.
Yeah, go
Bryce?
ahead, George.
Okay. We, ASHRAE standards call for us to change filters in all of our units 2 times a year. We change it 3 times a year to exceed the ASHRAE standards. We change all of the filters in every single classroom 3 times a year. And during that time, while we're changing those filters, we vacuum all of the interior portions of the units. We clean all the coils and we clean all of the ductwork. And I hope that puts everybody's mind at ease as far as the way the HVAC system works. As everyone knows, we have AC at Hugh Cole, 50% of the building. We have AC at Andrews School, 50% of the building. All of Colt School has air conditioning. And many other locations in the other buildings have spots of AC. But with the new guidelines set down today, then we'll also be installing the fans in all rooms that don't have AC.
Thank you.
I hope that answers your questions.
Yep. Thank you, George. Ellen, do you want to just weigh in a little bit on contact tracing?
Well, it'll be just a little bit because we're still at that kind of crossroads. So there are guidelines for if the school nurses send a child home with an illness, about them being within 48 hours tested, and the return results. The question is then now at some point, and this is a discussion that we need to have about who will be the contact people within our school district. There will be the point people between what we call the community mitigation team from the Rhode Island Department of Health and the schools, and then how we will go about alerting, I'm going to call them pods for lack of a different terminology, but if I'm a high school nurse, so let's say that it happens at the high school and there's a student in a particular English class, we would be able to then look at that child's schedule and who else is on the roster to provide that to the Department of Health, along with the child's other contacts, other classes, and who's in those classes or pods. So there's a lot of, Elizabeth, unanswered questions when it comes to that particular piece, but we're hoping as the school nurses to have a little more insight. We have meetings coming up in the tomorrow morning I have a meeting, and then the first week in August we have a meeting for the state, the school nurses and the school nurse physicians with the Rhode Island Department of Health to begin to how we're going to put all these pieces of the puzzle together. Because the one thing we have to remember is, yes, everybody's health is at stake, but you also have to provide privacy for the person that's affected. It's their choice to let you know, but it's our choice to protect the identity of the person. And I know that's not an exact answer to your question, but it's the best I can do right now.
Yeah, no, understandable. I mean, I'm sure that's a work in progress. I can't even imagine what I guess even, the governor, I'm sure, doesn't have an idea of what it's going to take to, if, who will close down a school? Will it be the governor? Will it be superintendents?
I think that will be a combination between the two. So if we were to have all right, so when you look at our district, because we're a regionalized district and now we're going to have kids in schools in 2 towns. So say you live in the Colt Andrews district and you have a 4th grader there, but you have a pre-K student at UCole. Right. You've got another one at KMS, you got another one at Mount Hope. Yeah, you're that blessed mother who has 4 children across the board. And so now we're talking 4 schools, 2 towns. So it'll come to a point where how many people are affected. There's a plan for how many, and that's where we go to this piece of limited and partial learning. How many people could potentially be affected? How many how much of school or classes need to be shut down. And that'll be a discussion between the schools affected, the Rhode Island Department of Health, and Dr. Bryce.
Yeah, okay, understandable. So fast forward to 2021.
Yeah, how about 2022? Let's go a little further.
2020, listen, I think we're all gonna just put an X through 2020.
Jumanji, game over.
I think we've got time for 2, maybe 3 more questions so we can get everybody out of here by 9 o'clock. Don't forget that we're starting our town halls tomorrow with Rockwell.
Hey, thank you very much, Dr. Bryce and everyone.
Thank you.
Dr. Bryce, I just wanted to alert you also of that document that we had of the 40 questions that were submitted.
Yep.
So we
You
have
know what we're gonna do? I think we're gonna post that. I think we're gonna post that document and our written answers. Today is Tuesday, so we will continue to add to that. We're gonna turn out like community questions and FAQs. We'll do it that way. I think we had a much richer discussion by having folks ask their questions.
Okay. Well, I do know that we have a question from Anne Marie, and then I also know that Mr. Bradshaw had something.
Got it.
So Anne Marie.
Hi, thank you. I wanted to clarify if the choice for families to choose distance learning or going to school is actually a choice at this time, or is it contingent upon RIDE approving the plan or their decision in general?
So it is an option that the district is offering. We included it in our plan and we await feedback from RIDE. But it's also one of the reasons why our school committee wants to meet and to discuss having a policy, because that might be something that we would include in a policy related to the pandemic.
Okay, because if it wasn't going to be a choice, maybe some families would choose homeschool instead, but then they might not have a chance to do it.
Well, and I think it's a great question to ask. One of the issues, and I don't want to speak about, I'm one of those people that absolutely believe that parents, it is your responsibility to make what you believe is the best decision for your child. But I am a professional educator, have been at this for 20 plus years, I think 27, 28. Time flies when you're in the middle of a pandemic. But I absolutely believe that our schools provide a high quality education, that we did a great job during distance learning. And I am not certain that there would be that level of success using other options. I'll put it that way. So I would advocate for parents that if parents have concerns, that they think about distance learning as a viable option versus something else, because I don't believe that those other options, are equal.
Okay, all right. I have one more question about, hopefully this wouldn't happen, but what, students and teachers are at risk, and the nurses and everyone at risk in the building. What is the plan if teachers and students, but teachers who are supposed to be there with the students do begin to get sick? There's not like an endless supply of teachers, and we wouldn't want our teachers changed either.
Yeah, so I think number one, we're gonna monitor the situation every single day. We're gonna be in buildings, wearing masks and practicing social distancing, doing all of those things, hand washing, using hand sanitizer, every 6 feet distance. We're gonna do everything we humanly possible can do to keep all of our students, all of our staff well. I think the real question is, people get sick as a normal, we talk about normal childhood illnesses as opposed to and normal adult illnesses, as opposed to someone actually it becomes COVID-19 positive.
Right.
I think they are different, and I think we're lumping them together. If people get sick, we would expect that they are not in school. If they're well enough while they're at home to teach, we would expect them to teach. If they're well enough while they're at home to learn, we would expect them to learn. If, however, they are sick enough where they actually need to shut it down for several days or longer, I think that is a different matter, and we'll have to address that.
Okay.
If the health department notices any type of clusters or spikes in the area, they would be the first to say, here's what you've got going on. And I think decisions at all levels would be made in the best interest of, we protect students, we protect staff first. All right.
Okay.
I think time for one more. Thank you, Marie.
Thank you.
I think we've got Brian Bradshaw.
I'll defer my questions in case the chair wants to go ahead and move on to subcommittee and school committee reports before 9 o'clock.
Thanks, Brian. If you're sure, I just want to thank Dr. Bryce so much. Thank you. I know that was a lot. And Dr. Santa, Tina, Ellen, George, and of course, Kate, who hosted for us tonight. Thank you all so much. This, as Dr. Bryce said many times, is a major team effort. I am a little concerned that we didn't get to the questions that were sent in. So I'm going to ask really quickly if anyone's still on this Zoom takes issue with us getting those questions answered and on our website or sent out to families ASAP, and would like to ask their question that they sent in now. We could maybe squeeze those in. Otherwise, I know we would get right on that. And Kate, maybe you and I could go through those, see what has already been answered from those, what still needs to be answered, et cetera, and move from there. And I hope you will all join us for the individual school town hall meetings beginning tomorrow night, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and again next week, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. So if anyone raises their hand in the next couple of minutes, or maybe seconds.
Madam Chair, I see someone waving their hand. I'm gonna say Maria Walker, and I do believe she was one that sent one in.
Okay, let's go to Maria, and then if there aren't any others, we can get those questions answered and sent out ASAP.
Okay.
Thank you.
Maria, I'm trying to, there you go.
Sorry, I shut off my volume. Oh, okay, maybe it didn't. All right, let's try this again. All right. So my question was with Cozy. I'm not sure if I missed this. So I apologize if I missed it. Thank you for everybody for what you're doing. I appreciate it. But Jade usually goes to Cozy, and I'm not really sure what's going on with Cozy and how the process is going to work with her job, if Cozy is going to be open if we go to school, and how the process is going to work.
Yep. So very quickly, and then I'll ask Dr. Santa to weigh in. So we know that we're going to operate Cozy. They are currently operating right now, and they are adhering to the guidance that they've received from the Department of Health. Stable groups, not intermingling of students in the different groups. Students are staying in the room and not able to go around to the different stations that they've done over the summer. And I give you those as examples because while Cozy will operate, I would expect that it would be much different than what we typically have experienced in prior years, where you walk past the cafeteria and you would see a large number of students in the cafeteria, and then they would self-select or maybe based on age would go to different classrooms or different subject areas. You're probably not going to see that. Some of the earlier conversations that we've had with Amy and the rest of that team have really focused on maintaining the stable group, small numbers, right? I think they said 12 for the summer. I don't know if that's going to go up for the fall. I haven't seen something that tells me what the numbers look like for the fall or during regular school. And then having those interesting sessions sort of rotate. The students stay in one place and then the sessions rotate around to the different classrooms, right? So that's the last understanding that I have about what COSI is going to look like. I don't know if Dr. Santa, if you've got anything to add.
Thank you.
Sure, I just have a little bit more to add. I want to give my thanks to Amy Brazzo. She's been amazing throughout this whole endeavor. She went to so many trainings during the summer and actually in the spring with the Rhode Island Department of Health and understanding the guidelines for childcare programs. And she successfully got us up and running this summer, which was great. The plan is very safe, very secure, but yet also very child-centered. So we are looking to have the program adjusted for next year based on the changes in school times. So we would have a similar setup as far as when we are open, so many hours before. I believe she says she's anticipating that in school, in Bristol, that she would, see, she didn't tell me here what time it's going to be, but she will adjust it accordingly based on the changes in the school day. That's one piece. And then we'll stick with the model of small groups and keeping kids in those designated groups and having the activities go into the students, also making use of the outdoor space, the recess and all of that. And also looking at supporting distance learning to the extent possible with their staff. So I know that they've already been doing some of that within the summer school program. So we'll be getting information out, we hope, within the next week, now that we have these guidelines worked out. So all of the COSI plans was really contingent upon what our reopening plans were. So we'll get that out to folks as soon as possible.
Great, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it.
Madam Chair, I don't believe I see any additional hands raised.
I think there is one.
Oh, you do. Okay.
One, Linda Rimashitis has her hand raised.
Perfect. Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
I have a quick question. I had emailed it in. I'm sorry to stick it in at the end like this. I have a lot of parents asking me that have children with special needs that have opted out for the distance learning. They are wondering if the special services that are indicated in their IEPs, like speech, OT and things, if their students will be able to access those in person in the buildings at some point if they choose to distance learn. Because those services are very difficult to do over Zoom or anything.
Absolutely. Linda, thanks for the question. So I'm going to start and then turn it over to Ed Clark, our Director of Student Support Services. So first and foremost, we want to be able to provide those services. If we are in the buildings, we certainly think that we could provide those services. I think the question's going to be the issue of scheduling, which is really going to come into play. And when we would provide those services, would it be during the day? And then are we potentially mixing students that are not in the building and adults, their parents, into the environment? So we've got to figure out how we would do that. And so I don't have a good answer right now, other than to say that we certainly are going to implement, to the best of our ability, all of the requirements of students' 504s and IEPs. Having said that, I do think that we're going to have to be flexible and potentially willing to work. And one of the ideas that literally, Linda, just popped into my mind is if we could provide some of those services, maybe not at the school for students that whose parents have opted for distance learning, but if we could provide that service in another location with staff dedicated to provide that service, maybe that would work. But that is completely right now my first cut at trying to come up with that answer. Ed?
This is probably one of the most difficult questions that we've been wrestling with the past couple of weeks, because we're not just, talking about, parents who may want to opt for distance learning, but we have students who are drop-in students. We have some itinerants that are in private daycares. We've got a private school in town, which we provide services for. So outside of the virtual option, we're really struggling with that. And again, it's another area where I am in discussions with other student support directors about how to handle this. But, and unfortunately, like Dr. Bryce said, we don't have a definitive answer on how we're going to do that yet. But all the services, obviously, that are promised and needed based on IEPs and 504s will be provided.
Can you still hear me?
Yes.
Thank you for that answer. That will satisfy a lot of parents initially to know that their students will get those services face to face at some possible working solution. I think that their biggest fear was that would not happen. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Dr. Bryce, excellent presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda.
For all your work and the team too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I don't see any other hands raised. So I just want to also thank all of our community members and families for showing up tonight and for asking such great questions and being a part of this conversation. And I know I speak for the school committee, and I think everyone else here when I say that we look forward to continuing this conversation and collaboration. So thank you so much. And we will now move on to subcommittee reports and initiatives, starting with Carly for policy and curriculum.
Good evening too. I want to briefly echo Chairperson Schofield's kudos to everybody involved in the school reopening plan. It's a monumental task and all your effort is certainly appreciated and very visible. On to policy and curriculum. As Dr. Bryce had mentioned earlier, the policy and curriculum subcommittee is hoping to schedule a meeting early next week, probably on Monday, but we're not totally sure yet, which is our normal time to meet during the month. Our first priority will certainly be addressing the COVID policy, and we also have some other policies that we've been working on in the past, including the hiring policy that we would like to nail up, and also continuing to do some work on the chairperson's initiative, which is having a student representative to the school committee. Thank you.
Thanks, Carly. And now Brian with budget and facilities.
So again, I'll echo what my colleagues have said. Dr. Bryce and your team and everybody that was a part of putting this presentation together and working this plan. Thank you for all your hard work and your dedication to putting together a pretty comprehensive plan. And thanks to my colleagues on the school committee, we're going to take a little harder look at some of the budget items that we brought forth tonight, and do a little bit of a better job deep diving into those. So I would expect that we're going to have Our normal scheduled meeting would be on August 17th, but we may have one sooner than that. So keep an eye out, but we will definitely have a budget and facility subcommittee to discuss the FY21 budget, to discuss line item adjustments for this year, and potentially look at some of the projects that we expect to work in FY21. So thanks for everybody's input tonight and your support. Thank you.
Thanks, Brian. Mr. Ramos with personnel and contract negotiations.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And I will also extend my sincere thanks to the entirety of the team that worked so hard in putting together the plan, the well-done presentation, and the thoughtful questions from so many of the community members tonight. And I know that we'll get the answers to the as yet unanswered questions posted very soon. And I know that there'll be even more robust dialogue at the upcoming town halls, where, as everybody knows, this is a constantly evolving situation. As we try to make plans, the information that went into some decisions that get made might be changing. So we're looking to provide you with the best information that we possibly can at the time that we're able to provide it, and know that we're all being as nimble and flexible as we can be to adjust to all of the things that are changing and as new situations are brought to our attention. On a personnel and contract negotiation subcommittee front, we are planning to be, I think we'll be having a meeting hopefully also early next week as we take the next steps in working toward the current contract negotiation with the BWEA. It is not yet scheduled, although I expect that it will be very soon. And that is what we have going on as we work towards making sure that we have a good working relationship with our teachers who are doing so much great work. Thank you.
Thanks, Adam. And lastly, we have the Wellness Subcommittee. Don't know if you, Carly, or you, Adam, would like to tackle that.
Carly's on mute. I don't know if she's going to speak, and the words will come out of my mouth.
That
At that, I started talking and then I couldn't find my buttons on my screen. It's been a long day. I will start, and Adam can certainly fill in if I miss anything. The Wellness Subcommittee hasn't been doing anything formal as of late. Earlier today, Adam and I started some very preliminary discussions about how we want to support our staff and students in a wellness manner going forward. As we've all mentioned, so everything is constantly changing and evolving, as is sort of the desires and needs of the Wellness Subcommittee. I know our needs are great, and we're trying to figure out how we can best sort of focus our efforts.
Yeah, and I'll just add, there was a number of times over the course of the presentation tonight, and then also in response to some of the questions, referring to the need to have time outdoors and outdoor learning spaces. And one of the things that Carly and I are definitely brainstorming around are ways that we might be able to partner with some community members who are focused in this area to try and enhance the ability to take advantage of some of the opportunities for open space learning that are so potentially abundant in our town, as we have so much great outdoor areas, both on our school properties and elsewhere in the town. But nothing formal scheduled at this time, as we try to figure out the ways to, so many things happening, as you've heard, and so much time and attention being spent in so many different places. I expect that we'll be focusing on this in the near term.
That's excellent. And I know that Dr. Bryce has also been, and I think Dr. Santa mentioned it tonight, we've all been really talking about outdoor learning and getting as much in as we can while we can, and thinking about tents and other things that we can use for outdoor classrooms. I think even hay bales came up as seating, which was intriguing to me.
I love it.
Yeah, yeah. So anyways, we'll continue those discussions. And I want to thank my fellow school committee members too. It's a lot of work on your end too. And I really, really appreciate all of you as well. And with that, I would love a motion to adjourn the meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made by Brian and seconded by Marge. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.